But would you agree that in some way, great leaders are, in some way, they are actors and actresses. In some way, great leaders play a role, right? They're on stage. I have one client that I worked with, CEO of a company. I remember him telling me that every day when he got to his office, he would park his car in the same parking spot every day. And then before he got out of his car every day, he looked up in his rearview mirror and said the following: "It's showtime." That's what he said every single day before he got out of his car. Looked in the rearview mirror and he said to himself, "It's showtime." And he did that to remind himself every day that from that point on, from the time he left his car, walked up to the office, walked into the building, walked past all of his people, walking back to his office, he was on stage. He felt like every day he was on stage. He was playing this role of CEO. And he had to remind himself of that every day, that he wasn't just, Jack Smith, parent, coach, softball player. He was now CEO, and he had to remind himself of that every day, that he was in that role from the time he walked into his office, and he had to portray that role, right? He had to be that great leader. And I don't think that's unusual for leaders. And it's an understanding that, I'm on stage, I'm being watched. I remember my client telling me that. He said, from the time I walked in my office, I knew I was being watched all day long. I was being watched and I was being listened to. Every word they were listening to. What did I say? What did I not say? What was my nonverbal communication? He said, I was on stage every single day as the CEO of that company. So I think that's an interesting concept for all of us as leaders to understand that we too are actors and actresses, and we're portraying this role of business owner, CEO, manager. And how well are we doing that day in and day out? I think another important attribute of leaders is self-awareness, understanding who we are and what it is that we're good at, what it is that we're working on, what it is that we struggle at. Great leaders, I think, are very self-aware. In fact, I saw a study not long ago. They asked a group of very effective leaders to evaluate themselves as leaders on a scale of 1 to 10. Anyone want to guess what the average score was?
8.
4. The average score was 4. And again, I think, that suggests self-awareness that, hey, people may think I'm good, but I've got a lot of work to do. I can get a lot better. Average score, 1 to 10, great leaders, a 4, suggesting, I could get a lot better. I could improve. Jim Collins, who I've identified several times, a best-selling author of the book Good to Great, he not only looked at the great companies when he wrote Good to Great, he also looked at their leaders, because he was curious that not only what do the companies share in common, but what do the leaders of these great companies have in common? And he referred to these leaders as level 5 leaders. 1, 2, 3, 4, level 5. Each of these were great leaders, level 5 leaders. And what he found is that each of these level 5 leaders had 2 attributes in common, each of them. Number 1, he said, is they had tremendous will, tremendous desire, not for themselves, but for their companies and for their people. Tremendous will. He said, the way he references, he said, any one of these CEOs would have ran through a brick wall if that's what it took for their companies and their people to be successful. So number 1 attribute is they had tremendous will, tremendous desire. The second attribute that he found that all of these level 5 leaders shared is that they were also very humble leaders. great humility. He said these were not the type of leaders that aspire to be on the cover of Time magazine or profiled on 60 Minutes. He said, no, these were very humble leaders. They were not that comfortable with a lot of attention. They liked the attention to be on their companies. They liked the attention to be on their people, their teams, but not on themselves. He said, these are the type of people that if you were sitting at a diner, if you were at here in Atlanta, we have Waffle House, right? You go in and get a breakfast or lunch. And if you're sitting he said, if you're sitting at the counter at a Waffle House, sitting next to one of these CEOs, you could spend 45 minutes talking to this CEO and never know that he or she was the leader of a big company because it wouldn't come up. They wouldn't talk about that. Very humble leaders. Their mindset that was directed outward, not inward. It wasn't about them. It was about their people.